Well, everybody, I did it. I finally shot my film on film, and I was very excited and ready to move on to the next stage. In this video today, I'm going to give you that experience from start to finish. Right after I got dailies back, I got my film developed, going through the process of working with 4 different editors over an entire year condensed into one single video of what was editing a short film on film. The short film is called Lone Mountain. It's a period film that I got a grant for from the Montana Big Sky Film Grant. We were able to scrounge together more money to double the budget to shoot this film on 16mm film, and we went and did it. If you want to see that entire process, I documented that. You can watch that right here. Now we're talking about the stages leading after we wrapped and what it took for us to get the film to the finish line. 5 film rolls of 400 feet each and a little bit of Ektachrome we shot, and it literally lived in my fridge before I finally got it sent in. Let's talk about the film process using analog film. First thing you gotta do is expose it to light. The next step is to develop your film using chemicals. And after those chemical baths, you have what's called a film negative. This is the film that I got back from our developer, the Negative Space, which is based out of Littleton, Colorado. Now this is essentially what you get back from the scan. They all combine the 5 rolls into 2 different, I guess, reels we have now with it. This is what you get when I regret doing this. I see it now. Maybe you can't see here. Basically, it's a negative, right? So when they say negative, it's your image is inverted like you would see in Photoshop. That's the film, right? From this, in order to take it to a digital format, which we're gonna be editing this on any other non-linear editor, we ended up using Premiere. What you have to do is now scan your film, which essentially is like taking a high resolution picture or scan of every single frame you see here of the 2,000 feet of film, which if I do the calculations, I'll put them up here. That's that many frames that they have to scan in order for us to do the film. What we ended up doing was what is called an overscan, which is essentially going from the sprocket to the other edge. Even though you're only be using the final image of the 1:8:5 aspect ratio, you're actually cutting in closer to that. We did want to have, there was no extra cost to it, and so I thought, why on earth would I not want to see the entire film strip? That's what we ended up doing. The scan we ended up doing was a 6K overscan ProRes 4x4 or 4444, and huge file. It's really, really big. Okay, just shipped off the film. I'm a little bit still nervous because obviously not until I get the confirmation from Nikki that it's all good and they have it. And I'll feel like, okay, I can wait for the scan to get back. And then there'll be the next stressor that I'll have, right? The next stressor will be, oh, now I'm gonna start looking at, it's gonna get developed okay, it's gonna be exposed correctly, you know, and then once we get the scans, then it's gonna be, oh, do we have enough takes? This is why I feel like the dailies is such a necessary part of bigger budgets, bigger productions, because to have every day you're getting your stuff developed, like, puts that safety net of like, okay, we know every day previous what it looks like, what we're getting, we can go back and shoot again if we need to. It just makes sense. We were shooting in Montana, which had no development nearby. We had to basically go off of what we saw the day of shooting, off the video tap, which we had on set. Had to kind of pray and wait, hoping that everything that we saw through the frame was gonna end up being the way we got it in the can. But we didn't know that for sure until we got it back to dailies. Alex and I were actually on a hunting trip with my dad and brothers. We ended up pulling up his laptop in the cabin and watching the entire, whatever long it was, over an hour or so of footage. And I'll tell you, I think both of our stomachs kind of dropped. Anytime you look at the dailies, you're gonna see everything raw, unedited, unpolished, which was very excited to see it being shot in film and looking as great as it did. Now, luckily, 90% of it I'd say was great, it was fine. There still were parts we realized, in particular, there were a couple shots that it was just too soft. And there were a couple of shots we realized too that, this is quite a bit underexposed than we were anticipating. Never saw anything overexposed, which is when you want to be with film. The overexposing is better than underexposing because it handles highlights so well, but underexposing, it definitely struggles with the shadows. Something happened with some of those dark scenes that just came out not exactly like we were anticipating. And for me, the most obvious pressing thing, we had very limited coverage, very limited takes, and probably worst of all, we had very limited handle. So for those who don't know what that is, handle is essentially the beginning and ending of a clip that you leave a couple seconds, sometimes 4 to 5 seconds, really because we were so limited on the film we had and we were running out. We really were, I was watching every take and cutting it right when I saw the cut in my head, and I knew that was making me very nervous. We were gonna be stuck with it because that's all we had. Let's talk about the film editing process and everything that it takes from the beginning rough cut, and assembly, the final product. There are essentially 4 steps that I have written down here. Let's go through each of them individually. The first is the assembly, and that is, there's a lot of steps that have to happen before getting to the assembly. Assembly cut essentially is where you take the raw film, in this case we had actual film, and it's all scattered in order for you to kind of set the table, so to speak, so the main editor can come in and dice away and do what he does best, which is the minute details, pace, storytelling. The next stage is the rough cut. And the rough cut is just like it sounds. It's a finished cut of the film, but it is still pretty rough. You're kind of going from a 10,000 foot level to a 3,000 foot level. In this point in the rough cut, you are worrying about which takes you like, performance, continuity, putting together coverage from a scene, making sure overall it is starting to feel more like a finished film. You're definitely getting more into the weeds than we were on the assembly cut. And that leads me to the third part of this 4-part, which is final cut, which you would expect is the last part, but it's actually not. It's essentially getting to what's called picture lock. You don't move a single frame after this. This final cut really is where director comes in, starts working with the editor on a very, very micro level now, and you're kind of tearing apart the edit and restructuring it and trying new things and kind of being more experimental now at this point. Rough cut takes you probably about 70% of the way there with your edit. And then going from rough cut to final cut, it's probably that last 25%, I would say, maybe even less. Most of the time is gonna be you're actually moving the timeline the least amount, but some of those minute changes can be very, very dramatic in the end. As I said before, once you get picture lock, you don't touch the editing suite. Now you're gonna be moving on to doing your sound design, the visual effects, if you have any, coloring the film, and of course, the musical score, which we'll talk about later. We had set for ourselves, finish this and have it ready to submit to film festivals late June, which only gave us about 6 months from where we were at to getting this thing completely finished. Who's gonna cut this? That was the big question I had in my mind. I was at a film festival, a film that I had helped produce was in a film of another student film, and I really dug the editing. I reached out to him, I said, hey, I'd love you to be the editor possibly for this project. Are you interested? Luckily enough for me, he was excited about the project and wanted to take a shot at it. The assembly process of the film, although I said only 30%, actually entails a ton of manual work. It was even gonna be more of a load on the editors when it came to syncing sound because we had to do it all manually. I knew with myself and Sebastian alone, it was gonna be too much for us to get even the assembly cut by June. So we had to boost the team. I had recruited from BYU, Idaho, where I went to school, Casey Tillett and Chris Jordan, and Abby Rosenau was actually one of my assistant editors that worked at my production company, Kino Media. We were, with the 5 of us editors together, we were able to jump in and start piecing this Frankenstein's monster together. Traditionally, when it comes to editing digitally, you have what's called auto sync. Every nonlinear editor, whether you're DaVinci or Premiere, and you can immediately with the computer press one button and it all syncs up automatically. For film, it is not quite that easy. When you shoot on film, there is no audio with your film, and you have to manually sync every single scene, every single shot, every single take. That's just the way it is. This is why you have the clapper on set. You'll see the scene, the shot, and the take. From that, you will have to go into your audio, find that call out on set. In the case where you'll show scene 1A, take 1, mark it. And then that moment when the clap happens, that is both a visual and an audio cue that you can line up together. For the audio cue, you'll see the little spike that's down on the timeline. I'll line that up here. And then you'll be able to go to the footage, and then down to the very frame, you try to find the part where the visual cue where that clapper touches. You'll essentially line up the audio track where your playhead's at, that spike, and then the moment on the frame of film where that clap hits. And then from there, the entire take is in sync until it stops, and they have to do the next one again. So essentially you have to do it on every single shot. That's the same process we had to do, and we got pretty good at it. And there were times where we didn't call out every single shot because we wanted to move fast. And when you just say mark it, clap, you have no idea what you're marking. In hindsight, I know now to always call out. You got to call out the scene, take, and shot, because that's going to actually decode what's going on when it comes to your editing. So we shot this thing out of chronological order, but besides that, we also had the way they developed it. The roles we shot, we knew our roles 1 through 4. They took the roles and spliced them together and had different ways of processing it. And so when we got back our scanned, developed film, it was not even in the order that we shot it. So it was almost like it was reshuffled again, and we had to figure out. Very manual process. Sebastian actually informed me he actually was unable to continue as our lead editor due to his work situation, and he was no longer able to take on passion projects. Chris, who was kind of rising in the ranks for me a little bit, there was a time and place where Chris was actually stepped up to become the lead editor to get us to it's not just assembly cut, but a bit of a rough cut as well. So I actually had Ben start working on these VFX shots long before we even had a final cut, definitely before a rough cut. Reviewing some of the VFX here in this film, I discussed with Ben that this was actually going to be a lesser shots for VFX in this movie. Maybe 75% of them are kind of the invisible VFX, a removal of a car in the background, a telephone pole, whereas in the case for the visual effects shots that are a little bit more additive, where we're putting something in the scene, we're putting something on our film, there were a lot fewer ones. We obviously had the smoke line that we're going to be putting in this. That's kind of the guiding line for our character, where he wants to go. We had, as I said, the tintype, which we didn't have, so we had to get the actual tintype later on, get it scanned, and then superimpose that scan back onto the tintype. And then the third major visual effects shot that we had was the house itself, the homestead. Add windows and repair some of the walls of it to where it looked more like he was coming home to someone instead of it being an abandoned home. So that was essentially our VFX. Not long after I had my rough cut finished, I was chatting with my buddy Jesse, and as I had mentioned this film, he actually was asking if we had anyone in mind to cut the film. Do you want to do it? And he was like, yeah, I'd love to be the one to help cut this and take the finish line. We had talked about the project, we went over it together, we talked story at length, and he promised to get me a rough cut hopefully within a couple weeks. And then I waited, another week went by, no answer, missed the deadline, missed the next deadline, missed the next deadline. Every single major festival, we just kind of watched it away from our fingers that year. Jesse finally got back to me, apologized profusely. Work got incredibly demanding, and he was just unable to put the time needed toward this project. At this very same time where I gave Jesse the job, I got an email from a random dude named Eddie Spaghetti was his email, and Eddie was an editor who had found my YouTube channel, saw what I was doing with the film, and wanted to know if I had anyone in mind to cut this film. Because as I checked his work, he's a freelance editor out of Texas, and I was just like, wow, this guy's got some chops. We decided to move on from Jesse on the project. I immediately recommended us picking up using Eddie to be our new editor. Eddie was really the first time for me at a project of this scale where I was working hand in hand with an editor, and my goodness, was it one of my favorite experiences of this entire process. The way that it works with an editor, again, the director usually is not super involved in this early cuts. It's the editor in the driver's seat, and you're kind of waiting for them to bring it back to you to review it. We would go back and give notes, and then he would go back and do another pass. And we did that about 2 or 3 times over the span of a month. When we got close to that final point, that the director, myself, sat in the chair and we started going through live together editing the film. We basically go on to Discord, and he would just show his screen, and live he would be cutting it and I would be watching. Yeah, beautiful.
Let that linger for a second.
Yep.
I don't like that blink.
Okay, before the blink. I mean, that one actually does kind of work because he does look pretty frustrated, walking in again.
Yeah, just the slinging off the shoulder.
Yeah. Can we lengthen that a little bit more in that shot before it cuts to her?
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
This look up?
Yeah, that's a big moment, I know.
Yeah, no, I agree.
We were getting really closer to our deadline. Near the end of November, we had final cut, and we were excited about where the project was at, and we were ready to open it up and get real feedback from a real audience. And that's where we established our test groups. And this is something that every filmmaker should do, no matter how big or small your project is. It's always good to get feedback. If it's even your spouse, if it's a friend, a roommate, someone that's not working on the project with you, to watch a version of it before you get closer to finishing it. And what we ended up doing is we had about 26 people that we had respond to us that would watch it virtually and input. I actually hosted 2 different groups of friends and family, and I hosted a kind of 2 private screenings in my theater room in my basement, and we watched the film that we were at in its rough, raw state. And this film does have quite a bit of complexity to the story. There's lots of different plot devices. There are things that it's minimal dialogue. So that we just knew that there's going to be things that we were trying to show visually that wasn't going to translate to audiences. I would definitely recommend having a bit of a formalized form for responses and questions and kind of get some data behind it. So we had 65% of people that said, "Did you like this for short film?" 65% said yes, which I was relieved about. However, 30% said sort of, and one person said not really, which, ouch, always hurts when you hear that from someone not exactly liking your film. We gave them questions like, given a magical pair of scissors, is there anything you'd snip out of this film? Would you like anything more of it you wanted to see? And luckily for us, there was a couple points that was coming up more regular than not. One of those feedback had to do with the second character that's established in the film. We have our period character with Jedediah, who is mainly his story. But we also have this other modern day character that kind of comes in halfway through the film and kind of goes on a whole new path. And it's a little bit jarring. And I knew people would be a little bit either love or hate it kind of response. And that was the number one issue that people have with the film. I like films that make you think and make you draw your own conclusion, but you can't leave people being confused. You have to give them some breadcrumbs to come home. We had many, many discussions as a team of what to do. Cutting out the second character altogether was even an option we thought about. I felt that was not the solution. The story that we had with these two timelines, one modern and one back in the past, was kind of one of the key elements that set this film apart. We needed to essentially set it up. And so Eddie had the idea that we should establish our modern day character at the very beginning of the film. Before we meet Jed, we meet this other guy. And that, I think, rescued everything with that issue that we had. We never really heard as many complaints from it from then on. The second issue we had to face was our major point with the gold bottle. If you remember on day 2, we had this amazing prop that was designed by Jordan Wood, our production designer, that was lost. And we had to makeshift a new one. And that did not quite read as well on camera. And on top of that, we actually did not get a shot at the campsite that was underlit and whatnot, and you really can't see because it's a little more darkly exposed. You cannot see what he's holding. So we knew we had to get a pickup shoot and kind of sprinkle in more moments of the gold in the bottle, him heading for gold and building up that allotment of his wealth. So you'll see actually here we ended up doing a shoot. Basically, all the close-up shots you see aren't Dave Martinez's hands. It isn't the right bottle, and we matched it essentially to be an insert shot that we did inside an Airbnb. And I think it looks pretty darn close. It looks pretty good. So props to Alex for lighting it and making it match. Okay, I'm here with Eddie. I think we're at picture lock, dude. I think we got picture lock. We've gone through this many, many times. I'm ready for it to move on to the next stage.
I learned a lot, and this is way more fulfilling than I thought it would be, honestly. So
good. I'm glad to hear that. You're like, so this is the last time I'm ever working with you again, Tam. The last piece that I'm like, we gotta nail in. I know the sound's gonna be awesome. I know the grade's gonna be great. VFX is gonna be looking good. It's just this score now. It's my last frontier to tackle and make sure that I get to where I want it to be. But everything else, I'm really happy with. And
yeah, hell yeah.
Sound is great, dude. So now we can roll into the finishing stage of our editing process. And the score, this was something that I am super passionate about. The score is so important. I knew the score was going to be very, very key in this film because we had such limited dialogue, such limited exposition. The score was going to carry a lot of the water for the emotion of the story and really help guide our audiences through this whole experience with our characters. So we had to get it right. Jordan had another project to get onto that was much larger than what I was working on, and we basically had a week to get it done. And luckily for us, Jordan is an executive producer on this film. While we were on the set, we would talk about the characters and themes and reference music, and I shared playlists with him and him with me, and we would kind of get a bit of a shorthand. And Jordan and I have worked on several projects before this. It was going to be a fight for sure to get it to where I really wanted it and have enough time to massage it. We started. We had our first session where he wanted to show me some work he'd done finally. He was really excited, and he pressed play, and he kind of watched my reaction, and I listened to it live. And I was trying so hard not to immediately shatter his feelings, but I said right off the bat, Jordan, I think it's way too big. It's like, no, are you serious? And Jordan's incredible composer. He loves to go big. He loves to be, John Williams or just huge. And I'm like, no, dial it back. So we had this kind of back and forth. And it came to a point in time where he even told me, he said, look, we have literally one day left, and I really can give you 1 or 2 more passes, and then we have to be done because I don't have any more time to work on this. I felt so disappointed. I feel like this score, if it doesn't get to where I wanted to get it to be, I'm going to feel like the whole film's a failure. I was in my PJs Saturday morning, the last day of us he's giving me the entire day to go through this and score it. I think we need to rewrite the themes you have, the musical notes, the actual notes and the chords and the way we're playing. I'm not feeling like that's meeting what we need. And we just started playing around the keyboard and started discussing what the themes were going to be. We were like starting from square one. It's the last day of us of getting this thing done. And he would play a chord or a note or two, and I would like hum notes for him. And it came to a point where there was a moment I remember he played a series of like 2 or 3 chords, and I just like stopped him and said, that right there, this is the kernel. It clicked in him. He could hear the music. I feel confident, and he felt confident that he could go and spot the rest of the film, the 23 minutes or so we were at. We came back later that day. I listened to all of his pieces. It's a huge sigh of relief. Just like, yes, this is the music I could see. And in some ways, it's even better than I was thinking originally because he's the artist behind it. I'm trusting him to do the score, not me. He went on the edge of what he was comfortable with, or what he knew, what he was familiar with, and I felt like he was able to, with a little bit of guidance from me of what I'm kind of feeling and wanting, he created something even better the two of us had ever anticipated. I love it. You can go check it out actually on his SoundCloud. I'll have the link down below so you can listen to it. I think it's some of his best music he's ever written. So after that, we had the score finished. Ricky was able to take the footage. Alex and I met with him a couple times, kind of established the look and feel of it, and he really led the way. And boy, when he sent back the coloring process, what we were getting in the first pass of the film colored, and I think that's when Alex finally was relieved. When he saw the color, I think he felt much more relieved. We had Brendan Taylor as our sound designer, and he was brought on. Brendan was able to take it, master it 5.1, and get us to the final finish line. We were able to have a final film mid-January, about a week before that first final deadline at Utah International Film Festival, which is our first debut. I think they accepted it even before it was fully done. We had a couple shots that were not fully colored, that VFX was still wrapping up, and we squeaked in at the very end at the nick of time and got it to the finish line. After all these years, it really was over the course of an entire year, we'd finished our film. We had a finished film to show the world now. What it all comes down to is have a very strong vision. Be willing to expand on your vision. Have a test audience. If you have a film you're trying to showcase, before you finish it, get some feedback on it. You're trying to get out of your own head, put it in the body of a new viewer who's never seen this film before, and have it be a seamless experience in the story where it all makes sense, it connects, and of course, get an Eddie. It's so important to get an editor. Even if they're not as good as an editor as you, I would say it's still worth to have someone else take a pass at your film, whether it's a rough cut, an assembly cut, or the final cut. Maybe you do the rough cut and they do the final cut. Passing it on to someone who has not experienced before your story and has the roadblocks and the smoke screens that you have in your mind on the story and the things you're missing, he will 100% make it better no matter what his skill level is as a storyteller and how experienced he is as an editor. Thank you for tuning in this long. This is a bit of a longer one, but boy, this has been a real fun series for me to make. And this isn't the end of talking about Lone Mountain. Please subscribe, because there's more to come on this film, and we're not done with it yet. Now, the production process of this was just as crazy and hectic, and in fact, if you want to see that, you can click on this video here. Hope to see you there.